Good morning.
Morning. We need more light. It's what we need. Okay.
We do need more light.
But we don't have more light. This is
we
the
do,
light
actually.
we have.
I'm going to turn this light on.
Look at her moving and shaking. Good morning. We'll be here momentarily. Oh, it's those lights. Do those help? They're kind of in the wrong place. But it's okay.
Better than nothing.
Better than nothing. Better than nothing.
You always use.
Thanks so much for joining us this morning. I'm Ani.
I'm Teresa Mitchell. Shall we just get started then?
And this is now A Bridge to a Better World.
Yes.
Come on in the frame. Come on in the frame.
I feel framed. Do you?
No, okay. Can you just
See how it goes around my head and makes me look like I'm all dramatic? These are dramatic,
look, I'm fluffing your hair.
flashing headlines from Democracy Now! Well, federal prosecutors have indicted President Biden's son, Hunter Biden, on felony charges of illegally possessing a handgun and making false statements in order to obtain a revolver in 2018. The charges carry a maximum sentence of 25 years in prison and fines of up to $750,000 for buying that revolver, because right-wing Americans would never fudge a line on their firearms forms just to get that sweet new Glock. And, with the one with the laser sight. Conservatives are constantly demanding strictness in gun laws. That's what they're all about. Strict gun laws, conservatives, how that goes together. I mean, every line of every application from Tulsa to Tennessee needs to be checked and can be checked because they're public records. And politicians who are pro-gun have lots of guns and have filled out lots of forms. And, I'm sure they filled out every line in every form correctly. And none of them would suffer from people like me, say, using an FOIA to check their gun forms against their personal histories to see if they told the truth in every line and risked that 25 years in prison. And, so I'm sure they won't mind if I just do that. Meanwhile, it finally becomes clear to me who Hunter Biden is. He's the president's son. He's a firearms buyer. That's what he does, I guess. No, seriously, they're aggressing on Hunter Biden. That seems unfair, but it's Hunter Biden. He's not an official like the past president's kids were. So,
you're talking private citizen, right?
Yeah, he's like
just
some guy.
Right. I was going to mention that Elie Mystal has been putting up posts on Twitter about this. He's been tweeting about this. And I think that he's had this one tweet kind of summarizes it. And Elie Mystal says, of course, prolific writer, author, an analyst, legal analyst, and writer for The Nation. Good job, Merrick Garland. Your weakness has orchestrated the indictment of a private citizen trying to overcome drug addiction so Republicans can try to hit a bank shot off of him to his loving father, all because you were afraid of looking political to Fox News viewers. And I think that kind of summarizes it.
Yeah, that and the sheer pettiness of the whole thing. And we've come to expect this from conservatives. I mean, the impeachment of Clinton was, when you pull back and look back all those years, that was for consensual sex. And Clinton had sex with Monica Lewinsky, who was coerced into it. No. Who was underage. No, she wasn't underage.
Well,
it was her idea.
I am going to put it out there that, here's one of the most powerful men in the world, stooping his intern. And that's squidgy at best. Squidgy at best. But is it an impeachable offense? Or is it something that a lot of dudes have done? It's a sexual harassment. Is sexual harassment, if you're going to frame it as that, and it's a stretch, but is that an impeachable offense?
Because Republicans never engage in such things. And
Jean Carroll.
Yeah, well, and
it was actually in any way.
It's so long ago people have forgotten. It was actually revenge for daring to impeach Nixon, and that's the middle name of the Republican Party. How dare you? I mean, laws for you, not for us.
And honestly, there's so much to say about the Clinton impeachment. I didn't know we were going to go there this morning, so it's a
Well,
little
they're
it's
going
a
to
little
impeach.
rusty. But let me just say that it's astonishing to me how vilified Clinton was by the Republicans in the 90s, because that president was so fiscally conservative. He was so conservative in so many ways. The um, Crime Reform Act, the Effective Death Penalty Act, the mega media mergers with the FCC, that all happened under Clinton. The kicking all the supports out of welfare happened under Clinton, but he wasn't good enough. He wasn't hard enough on the people, and so they had to impeach him for bullshit charges. Uh, anyway, because it's a revenge of the two-party system.
Right, exactly. I mean, yeah, because that's how petty they are. Let's make friends with the Republicans. Never works. Never. Can't. And it's the same with the Biden impeachment. I mean, Biden's being impeached because we dared to impeach the Republicans president, and it doesn't matter that we impeached the Republican president for good reasons, for calling Zelensky, remember him, and trying to set up a false prosecution just to affect the election, and holding back U.S. funds to do it. That's called corruption. Or impeaching him a second time for trying to destroy democracy altogether. Those are good reasons to impeach somebody. And why are they impeaching Biden?
No one actually has been able to answer that
We
question.
don't know either. They'll see if they can find something.
There's an investigation to see if he's committed impeachable offenses. I think that's the stages we're at.
Yeah.
Which is just kind of an astonishing thing. If anyone has had a job during some sort of crazy hostile takeover of management, and they decide that you might have things to say about their new management style and how it may or may not fit the company that you've worked for, say maybe a couple of decades. So they say, well, we're going to put you on leave while we investigate each and everything you've done for months, because we might find something we can fire you for. It feels a little, how do we say?
Petty, retaliatory?
Retaliatory, insubstantive, I think is the word I was going to use. Insubstantive. An actual, an actual investigation actually has cause for the investigation, and not just because we can quid pro quo.
Yeah, I mean, it's petty, and Republicans are petty, and that's where they're coming from, because it's a degeneration of the body politic at this point. If you look at them,
nice.
It's a nasty set of circumstances, and it's the Republican Party at this point is basically an encouragement to act badly. And when it comes to impeaching Biden, if he has done something and there is a reason to impeach him, well, impeach him. Okay, get back to us.
Let us know. Let us know how that
Rule of
goes.
law and all that. So COVID is back. The CDC is recommending everyone 6 months and older, so you 7 months old, pay attention, get an updated COVID-19 vaccine to protect against potentially serious outcomes of COVID-19 illness this fall and winter. Updated COVID-19 vaccines from Pfizer and BioNTech and Moderna will be available later this week. Vaccination, they write, remains the best protection against COVID-19 related hospitalization and death. Vaccination also reduces your chance of suffering the effects of long COVID, which can develop during or following acute infection and last for an extended duration. They write, if you have not received a COVID-19 vaccine in the past 2 months, get an updated COVID-19 vaccine to protect yourself this fall and winter. They say the virus that causes COVID-19 is always changing, and the new one is the one they're calling bivalent, right? Two different variants in this.
The old one was bivalent too.
Oh, okay. And protection from COVID-19 vaccines declines over time. Receiving an updated COVID-19 vaccine can restore protection and provide enhanced protection against the variants currently responsible for the most infections and hospitalizations in the United States. Last season, those who received a 2022-23 COVID-19 vaccine saw greater protection against illness and hospitalization than those who did not receive a 22-23 vaccine, which brings me to me. I had the vaccine. You had the vaccine.
We had the vaccine.
We had the COVID.
Yep. Yeah. We are now what? We are a week post
Yeah.
Paxlovid.
I didn't like it, but it wasn't nearly as severe as the first time. And of course, it really.
It's
hit you
true.
hard
There
first
was almost no comparison between what we experienced the first time through and what we experienced last week. But we were vaccinated fully the first time too.
Yeah.
And COVID is a snaky virus. It hits us differently every time. Its symptoms are not set in stone. They can appear different from person to person, from infection to infection, and it makes it hard, really impossible at this point to track in the communities, as people are encouraged to do their home tests. And I don't know very many people that have actually reported those home tests, because most folks just follow the instructions now of, all right, you got a positive home test, stay home for 5 days, do these things, lots of rest and water. And if you run into these things, call somebody about it. So we're not really tracking this as a public health issue anymore, because after all, the emergency's over, right? So we don't have to fund vaccines that we're telling people to get. We don't have to fund testing centers. We don't have to actually make a plan for how to deal with the fact that we're going into the 4th year of a pandemic that is ever evolving.
We're not getting that daily tracking, and I think we need it. We have been mask wearers even before we got it that second time. We were wearing masks to the point that people were giving us funny looks at times and places. We were not absolutely consistent, obviously, but
no, that's obviously. I don't think masks are 100% effective, but they're very effective.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, right. So it's definitely time to consider masking, and there's more information about it though. And
don't just consider it. I think this is our plea. Please mask. If you are in public, if you are inside, if you are not in a space to socially distance, mask. Right now, we are in a big outbreak. We know this. Whether we have good stats right now in our area or not, we know this anecdotally, right? Because I'm seeing and hearing from people who are like, wow, I've got it again. Yeah, well, me too. Wow, I haven't seen you in a couple months. You mean you have it? I have it. And I'm watching this chatter on social media between my friends and acquaintances, and I know it's happened to us.
Friends that we did not see during the interval
right.
Have gotten it. So there's more to it, and more reason to take it seriously, and that would be microclotting. We know that. I always think of the Saturday Night Live skit when I say we know this. We know that microclotting happens, that it's an essential part of this disease, and it happens in your heart, happens in your brain. New York Times says during the first 2 years of the pandemic, there were approximately 90,000 more deaths in the United States attributed to cardiovascular disease than were expected for that span of time. And they don't come right out and say it, but of course, a big chunk of that is actually COVID deaths, and that's particularly true in Texas. They would find any way to write down something besides COVID on your death certificate. They were pretty obnoxious about it. They write the majority of those occurred in people 65 and older, the age group with the highest risk for cardiovascular complications, but heart-related deaths also increased dramatically in younger adults. In fact, a study found that the sharpest rise in deaths from heart attack during that period occurred in 25 to 44-year-olds. Some of these cardiovascular-related fatalities may have happened because it was harder to access medical care during the height of the pandemic. But physicians and researchers now have little doubt that COVID-19 itself was a factor. And Nature.com says that the first 6 months after COVID can have heart complications and heart attacks, according to their statistical studies. So caution is indicated also. I think that, just personal opinion, it's a good idea if you have NSAID in your cabinet and you want to use that to ameliorate the pain. Well, they also are known as, the manufacturers hate this. They're blood thinners. Manufacturers say, no, they just slow clots. But they do slow clots, and clots are the problem. So it's probably a good idea to take naproxen or ibuprofen, maybe even aspirin. I don't like aspirin so much. So I'm going to change topics here and go to another aspect of global warming besides zoonotic diseases, and that would be the tropical storm warnings that are in effect for parts of Canada and a wide stretch of coastal New England that includes about 7 million people in Maine, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire as Hurricane Lee moved north across the Atlantic Ocean early Friday. That's what you do in Boston. You, you know, look after your palm trees. You take down your cabana umbrella every now and then for those tropical storms. Well, a tropical Hurricane Lee was still hundreds of miles away as of a couple hours ago from New England, but it's producing tropical storm conditions in Bermuda. Conditions are forecast to deteriorate in the northeastern United States and Canada later today. Portland, Maine weather forecast for today, tropical storm conditions. Something a little different there.
You know, it's the other day when I first heard about this, I was like, that's never happened. Well, it has. And occasionally tropical storms do make it up to New England. I think the last one was about 30 years ago.
Put up your conga drums.
I think there's been 6 in the last 150 years. Pulling that number out of a vague memory of an article I read a few days ago. But it is an extraordinarily rare event, right? We know this. Just going to keep going back to that Saturday Night Live character all morning. But it's, again, looking at this, and you're probably going to get into more global warming, so spoiler alert. But looking at this in the big picture frame of once in a lifetime, once in a century, once in a 50-year phenomenon that are occurring at an amazing rate around the planet all through this year. We have intense flooding throughout the globe. The flooding that just happened in Libya is absolutely mind-boggling. It's heartbreaking. To see the flooding in Greece, following the wildfires, following the wildfires throughout North America, following the flooding throughout South America and Asia. There seems to be a lot of weather happening. The over 60 days now, over 90 days of 110 in places in the Southwest. You with the heat wave information?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I didn't bring the specifics on that, but the heat domes were astonishing, and that's something we got used to.
Continuing.
Heat domes are happening around the world, and people know this word now. This phrase, heat domes, so now there's this new flooding phenomenon. We don't really have a word for that yet, but 11 inches in a day, 20 inches in a day, happening anywhere randomly. And as I said last week, if it happened here in Portland, Oregon, it would, it'd sweep away our houses too. It'd break our dams. So, and I have to wonder how that affects forecasting and whether it's possible to say that you're going to get 11 inches of rain or it's got to change the whole science of that. But this is the world that we live in now, the 11 inches in a day world anywhere in the world. We think of certain areas as being flood prone, but now anywhere on the globe is prone to the most astonishing floods. So I want to turn to article from Labor Notes. TikTok at midnight, the clock ran out, they write. Auto workers massed on picket lines, the first ever simultaneous strike at the big 3 automakers, General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis, started September 15th. That's today, with 13,000 workers walking out of 3 assembly plants in Michigan, Ohio, and Missouri. There are 146,000 auto workers members at the big 3. The UAW is calling its strategy the stand-up strike, a nod to the Flint sit-down strike of 1936 to 1937 that helped establish the union. And so I brought my copy of People's History of the United States to remind you that this is a good thing to have around the house and to refer to when you see something like referring to the sit-down strike, which too many people just don't know that much about. It was a sit-down strike. That was a strategy that worked for a while. But it wasn't just about, it wasn't just about sitting down. It was about, of course, occupying the factory. And there is aspects of that. There are aspects of that now happening. They are going to be standing up at their jobs and slowing down and doing various strike actions. Labor Notes writes, the idea is to keep the companies guessing. If they don't move on the union's demands, more pain will be applied, but the companies won't be able to predict where. An all-out strike is still a possibility, Fain said. And the 1936 sit-down strike at GM is famous for being effective. But the fact is, it was just a hell of a fight. It wasn't just a matter of peacefully sitting down. The National Guard was called in after the cops showed up, shot at the workers. The workers shot back with rifles because they saw this coming. They had put up barricades. People died. National Guard was brought up to General Motors. And, the shooting died down once the National Guards showed up. But that tells you just how intense the standoff was. And at that time in 36, unions were building up. The Communist Party was building up. And against them was, and is now, actually, the Pinkerton and Pinkerton-like industries. And Pinkertons didn't just show up to break the strike. They infiltrated. They snooped. They were a secret police force that was deadly, and they were murderous and got away with murder on behalf of the corporations. It was just one hell of a fight, and it will be. That'd be my prediction. I wonder what you got to say about all that, about the labor situation.
Well, there's maybe a little too much.
A little too much at once. I mean, what do you say when I'm talking about a violent standoff? All those years ago, how long is 36? That's 90. Is getting on to 90 years ago.
Yeah, well,
87 years ago.
So I think what we're seeing, there was a lot of worker solidarity. There was a huge union movement, right? We know the history of the Wobblies. We know the sit-down strikes coming through the 30s. Then things kind of got, suppressed with the event of World War II, and then with the anti-communist and all of the, AFL-CIO sort of stuff that weakened unions throughout the 50s and up till, certainly through Reagan, right?
The Taft-Hartley Act in 47.
Those things.
There was a lot of...
So it was very directed. And what I'm seeing now over the last couple of years, really, it's since the pandemic, I think workers have realized that we are absolutely in a position of not much to lose. The fat cats, the owning class, want to squeeze every last drop of blood and productivity from our lives. We are dehumanized at every turn. And so the idea that there is a growing union movement, and there is a growing union movement, and that workers are radicalizing each other and trying to gain the grounds that we once had, and to actually move it forward, is absolutely essential to breaking the spell of capitalism. And breaking the spell of capitalism is a lot of what you wanted to talk about this morning, isn't it?
Well,
breaking the spell of societal control.
Yes, it is. Thank you for reminding me.
About the topic that you told me you wanted to talk about, and we prepared for? Excellent, then.
I can't think clearly now. My brain is gone. Isn't that how it
goes?
That's
good.
I did have some notes about that.
Good. Well, I thought you did, because you read them to me earlier, but they were good.
Yes.
Excellent.
Well, I wanted to talk about just how insidious propaganda and mind control is in this country. I occasionally see, when I'm looking at social media that has international aspects, I occasionally see people asking, what is wrong with Americans? Why don't they move on this? Why are they agreeing to these abominable wages? And the answer is, we've been subject to the most intense and the most successful mind control that has ever been devised on the planet. We've accepted things that we initially pushed back on, and that are now lies that are now the groundwork of our acceptance of society. I'm talking about, in this case, 9/11. 9/11 was a fraud. Most of us, most Americans have forgotten that 3 buildings fell and the Pentagon was attacked during 9/11. And even more than those, have forgotten about the anthrax attacks that terrified everyone. And the real study, and not the official investigation of the anthrax attacks, indicates that it came out of Fort Detrick. Uh, and the people who were associated with it were Americans who were simply trying to frighten other Americans to add on to the terror of 9/11 and produce a new spasm of imperialist war. And this was successful. That and added on to that was the false threat of weapons of mass destruction, weapons that did exist to some degree in Saddam Hussein's Iraq before they were eliminated. We had people with arms control going out there and making sure they were eliminated, and then the Bush administration just kept bringing it up to frighten Americans. And I remember here in Portland, the Portland Oregonian once ran a speculative article on what it would be like if anthrax were released from a barge in the middle of Portland. Now, why did they make this speculation? Not because any barge had been rented, not because any anthrax had been found, or any group had come up with such an idea. It was something that was simply, it's a bug that was put in their ear by the secret police. Oh, and yes, we're supposed to think that we don't have secret police here in the United States. So the result was 1 million dead of war and related aggressions in the Middle East and Afghanistan. That propaganda was wildly successful, and it resulted in a mass democracy-breaking, rationality-breaking, brainwashed reality. People who had denounced the USSR for their gulags degenerated into cheerleaders for mass murder and torture, and that was true for Democrats and Republicans. And it's water under the bridge now. There are people who have grown up with all of those lies, and they're just as thick as the lies that I grew up with about how the Indians just disappeared with a smile and a wave, and Columbus was, a nice boy who just really loved to sail the ocean blue.
That was a line from Howard Zinn.
That was from Howard Zinn. QAnon, you repeated that one a lot with a smile, I think.
It got stuck in my head. Anyway, carry on.
Well, so now we have new wrinkles of mind control, and they are somewhat more divided. We have a portion of the society that bites on the QAnon Trump blood libel sort of thinking, and they have to suffer the constant tension, cognitive tension between what they are taught to believe, what they want to believe, and reality, so that hundreds of thousands out of over 1 million dead of COVID died while denying that they had COVID at all, or that
or that COVID was much of a problem.
That COVID was much of a problem, or that the treatments or lack of treatments were real, and that they could instead treat it with whatever Trump said. Some of them actually drank bleach. We don't know how many exactly. Ivermectin, horse warming paste, and
hydroxychloroquine.
Right, and the social media was very much a part of this. They would silo articles to people and delude people who didn't know how to do research, who would say that they had been doing research. One example that sticks in my mind is a statistical study of people who had COVID in certain parts of Africa who were given ivermectin and got much better. And the reason, of course, that these groups, rural groups in Africa, got better with ivermectin is because they suffered terribly from worms. Ivermectin is a dewormer, and so it removed part of their health problem. But this would be directed
giving them more vitality to deal with the other health emergencies that they may be having.
This would be people who are not sophisticated enough to look at the larger picture and understand that they're being had. Right-wing people died cursing healthcare workers.
I'm just going to clarify. You're not talking about the people that were involved in that program that were given that treatment. You're talking about the people that misinterpreted, possibly deliberately misinterpreting the data coming from that particular program.
Right. Zuckerberg.
Thank you. I just
siloed this information so people would see this, and not understanding, say, oh, see, this is proof that my horse paste works. Right-wing people died cursing healthcare workers as they tried to save them, because they knew hydrochloroquine was the true grail, and that's only if they accepted COVID was real at all. And it's exactly the same sort of mass brainwashing that applied in World War II. The Japanese worked U.S. prisoners to death on hell ships because they knew there was absolutely no doubt that GIs were just demons approximating real humans and needed extermination. Same with U.S. bigots murdering BIPOC. Same with Nazis eliminating Jews because, they knew that everyone knew that they ate children in secret rituals. They poisoned wells. Same with right wing ready to kill people like Ani and me to protect children, because we're groomers. We exist to hurt little children and to degrade their lives. Same with Texans and Arizonans dying in heat waves, especially men, because they know global heating is a hoax. They know it. Everyone says it. And mind control is doubly and triply effective when you can get a large group to repeating it, because then you get a cult-like effect.
And social media and the way that it groups us, tribalizes us, creates these echo chambers that is actually, this phenomenon's not new, right? This is what has shaped American society as we know it. But the phenomenon is accelerating and worsening. It is getting exponentially worse because of the way we are now sharing information. Our new technology allows us to live in echo chambers, constantly amping our own views and dismissing and dehumanizing those that hold other views. And if you don't see that for what it is creating a very dangerous social situation.
And it's not a mistake. It's very profitable, and that was understood years ago. It's been exposed as an insidious profit-making method. It's been exposed as poisonous, and Zuckerberg keeps doing it, and the other Musk keeps doing it, and social media keeps doing it because the big money is there, and
people stay engaged if they're angry.
It's the same, yeah. It's a way of making people, the more angry you are, the more likely you are to click a link. That's money for advertisers. Yes. Destroying the society is profitable. It's the same as the oil companies. It's absolutely amoral.
Thank you. It is the same as it's destruction of the planet and the people for profit. That is exactly what it is. And the same mindset for big tech and big oil, big pharma and big agriculture for that matter.
Yeah. So
it's the biggies.
We need to understand what's actually happening, that it's not accidental, that this is being directed to destroy us. And so the question is, can the people who've been driven into cults with this sort of technique, can they be distracted? What can be learned from cult deprogramming techniques? Deprogramming used to mean grabbing someone out of a cult physically. You shove them into a van and get them away. You kidnap them. I'm not saying this is good. And you took them away, and then you discovered that it wasn't so easy to get them to think some different way because people identify with the lies in a cult. This is exactly what has happened with the Trump cult, the QAnon cult. This is people's identity. They don't want to hear something's different. Immoral or not, it's not physically possible to remove Trumpers from the Trump society. There's whole states where everyone agrees that they need to take ivermectin, for example, or that transgender people are groomers, and they're mad about it. They really need to do something about these transgender people, as far as they can understand. So, what countermeasures can justly be applied to those who deliberately create black propaganda? I think it should be identified. Profiting from this sort of thing and doing this sort of insidious misdirection should be a crime. It's not free speech any more than shouting fire in a crowded theater. The question is, what works to break this up? What deep social cues, what N-words and phrases, body language, images, and other sensory cues reinforce the reactionary fascist Trump mob, and how can they be countered? How can we get people to actually ask that first question? Bobby, when did you first decide that Trump was, rather than a peculiar and nasty old man, when did you decide that he was infallible? When did you first, make that decision? And now these questions are being asked in reverse by Charles Koch, for example, who then deploys billions of dollars to reinforce exactly this sort of deadly society of lies, working in in concert, that's the word, with with what was I saying about my brain, with Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, not just the rabid fervor of the Trumpers, but the suicidal apathy and reinforced confusion of the majority. So we have to ask, what are the techniques of disempowerment? How are people convinced not even to vote, to look away, to pretend not to care? How is this deadly mental feebleness and lack of self-protection presented as sophistication?
Mm, it's a good
It's a
question,
lot of
isn't it?
questions and not a lot of answers, but the questions have to be asked first. So that was what I wanted to say about mind control.
Thank you. Right. I just wanted to add one little thing to that. It hit somewhere towards the beginning of your comments. This is a post on social media. It's not really attributed, but it hits in the right way. I've seen a couple of friends share it around. And basically, it points out that the national emergency for COVID-19 ended earlier this year, as we know, even though COVID itself has not. And we're looking at a resurgence. And I spoke with one of my regular medical staff yesterday, one of my regular nurses that I have been interacting with all year since I had COVID last fall. And she told me that protocols are changing around things again in the hospitals as doctors are looking at what they're expecting to be a really, really horrible season with many serious respiratory viruses competing for, prominence in our neighborhoods, in our communities. That there is talk in the medical systems about how they need to be prepared for this. And are we talking about emergency protections again from the state, from the government that is supposed to be there to serve the people? No, we have not. We have not talked about that. And so this post basically does point out that the COVID-19 virus continues to spread unchecked, but the supports for it have been removed. It's no longer a state of emergency. That's politically inconvenient. That said, the national emergency that was declared for September 11th, which, as you mentioned, is now what, 22? I can't do math this morning suddenly. 22 years old. We just had the 22nd anniversary. That's been extended over and over again. And to compare those two national emergencies and the provisions that they brought forth, the COVID national emergency expanded access to health care, supported wages, supported finances for many workers, not all workers, some workers, the indispensable workers. What were they called? The essential workers, of course, were sacrificed and had to keep coming to work and didn't get that kind of support. We really need to think about what we mean by essential workers and essential services. We also need to think about sacrificing each other, especially when you're making minimum wage at a grocery store. So, but that a little aside, but one of these national emergencies expanded social programs and societal support. That's the one that got discontinued for political reasons rather quickly and in the midst of the emergency. The other national emergency, the one that's been going on for 22 years and continues to be on the books in some way affecting us, has systematically dismantled privacy protections. And it has decreased our civil rights, and it has increased the power of authority, departments of authority, Homeland Security, the executive branch, etc., to harass, detain, and persecute. So, which one did we keep? Which one is necessary? Which one is... There's a lot of smoke and mirrors. I think I'll just leave it there. I'm looking at you for a rejoinder.
Well, I'm agreeing with what you're saying, so I won't.
You won't rejoin
quite exactly. I'll just nod my head. How's this?
I feel good. I feel good about
this.
that.
What do you call this? Is there a word for this?
Yeah, there is.
I look serious now.
I can't
I have
remember.
glasses
It's-
and a divot in my head, so
I've had that since
so
I
when
was
I
a
nod my
teenager.
head, it's like
It's
I
my
really thought about it.
my one and only wrinkle since I was 16. Okay. Um,
Ow.
that's all. That's all I have for that part of the show. What about you?
That's my
Oh, we're
remarks as
winding.
well.
We're winding. Okay.
Yeah.
So in that case, what I want to do is talk for a moment about, you know, magic and spirituality and staying grounded and staying together and being resilient through these times that are mind-bogglingly hard. Okay, we've always talked about, well, we have some challenges to get through. It's like, again, exponentially things just seem to be spinning a little bit faster, a little bit wonkier. And so we have to create the center that cannot that we need to create the center that can hold, and we need to do that together. We need to hold each other and create real community, real access to mutual aid. We need to be there for each other because we need to realize, of course, that those empowered don't have much interest in serving us. We need to elevate, of course, the voices of those who have actually made it through, the very few folks who, like Rashida Tlaib, who is standing with the striking workers in Wayne, Michigan this morning, the congresswoman from Michigan. Uh, some very few folks have made it through the gauntlet and have actually been popularly elected. They are so few within the system that they don't have a lot of actual legislative power, but the power of their voices speaking out from their seats from their elected seats gives me a little bit of hope.
The squad.
The squad, and the squad has grown, over the last 6 years, and despite the best efforts of the establishment to keep them small and keep them disenfranchised.
To vilify them.
So, moving forward on that, I wanted to look at the fact that we are now in the fall, that Equinox is actually 1 week from today. It is on the 22nd this year. And that is the time of balance. We are moving into that right now. This is the second or the middle of the harvest festivals. And if we look at really rooting ourselves in what is happening around us, Northern Hemisphere, here we are. I'm pretty rooted to this place. It's where I am. And we look at the shortening of the days, we look at the changing of the weather, and we know that this is the time that the harvest happens. The grapes are full, the orchards are starting to produce. In the agricultural or the agrarian uh, calendar, it is the time of bringing in that which we have sown. Metaphysically, spiritually, witchily, it is that same time, right? What we put out, what we have worked towards this solar cycle since last winter solstice is coming to fruition. This is the second from the last of the holy days, the turning points of the year, for this cycle. We have the equinox, and then we have Samhain coming up the end of October. Then things lie fallow for about 6 weeks before they begin again in the new solar cycle, which will be the next winter solstice. So, what have you sown this year? What are our intentions? What have we put out together? And let's see how that is coming back to us at this time. That is the cycle of things. It's, when we look at the wheel of the year, it's really about spirals. It's about learning our lessons, gathering our wisdom, integrating our experiences to spin into our wisdom. And it's about then being able to renew that cycle just a little bit deeper, a little bit, delve a little bit more into the mysteries and how things work. in our own hearts and bodies and minds and spirits, how we connect and hold each other. And I found a couple of poems that I wanted to share. These were published in the Wee Moon calendar, Gaia Rhythms for Women. It's a calendar I've been using for, I don't know, 20, 30 years, 30 years, something like that. I think I started using it when I was in college.
Say rhythms for women 3 times.
I can't. um, but here's a poem. It is copy free. It's, shareable. It's by Maya Spector, and it's called The Spiral Way. And I thought it encapsulated this moment very well. Walking the spiral way, circling round, maybe deeper, maybe higher with each revolution. It is always like this. The years circle and pile up on each other. The seasons turn, wind around, then return. Once a girl, then a mother, now a crone. Still walking, still turning in the spiral way. Hair brown, hair white, hair gone. Smooth baby skin gone coarse, now lined and deepened. Walking the endless circuit, making the turns. Marking the way things change, and yet they always remain the same. Even when the end comes for you, the earth spirals. It keeps going around. It keeps turning. It keeps building. It keeps on. And so I wanted to read that. I also wanted to read this Lunar Fragment. It's an excerpt from a larger work by Marna Scooter, also published in the Wee Moon, and it notes lunar fragments. Off we fly, souls regenerated, onward to the next great arc of the sky, the next beautiful unfurling. Our eyes are flecked with nova and star stuff. We are made for this journey. And I found a lot of inspiration in those words this week, and I wanted to share them with you for that. As we hold each other through this harvest time, let's look at ways we nourish each other. Let's look at ways we nourish community. One of the main reasons we're interested in doing this weekly live stream is because we want to broaden public discourse. We want to, throw some rocks at the smoke and mirrors that hold the patterns of the societal control that Teresa was mentioning earlier. But I also think that we really are striving to create community. It's always a thrill to see our regular folks joining us, and how we can interact online and in the real world, I think is essential. We need each other. And I am delighted that there is a community here on Friday mornings. Whenever you are able to join us online, it's a wonderful time. If you are joining us on Team Replay, as some viewers mentioned, later on in the day or over the week, leaving your comments and leaving your thoughts, it's a wonderful space to share our collective concerns, our collective ideas, our collective aspirations. So I wanted to put that out there. Please do like this video. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. This is now Bridge to a Better World. That's what we do. That's who we are. Again, I'm Ani. This is Teresa, and I'll just close with this tarot reading. Basically, what we have this week, we have the Ten of Swords. We have the Ten of Swords inversed. We have the Knight of Cups. And we have the Five of Swords, right side up. And so what does this all mean? It means, damn, there's been some hard times. Ten of Swords is really about you are just in the throes of conflict and despair. It's where all of your thoughts kind of beat up on you. And it's just, you have to kind of get through this last hardship of, the harshness, the like a fight. I'm going to say fight, conflict. The fact that it is, in fact, inversed with the Five of Swords tells me that conflict has been resolving, but there's a lot of hurt. There's a lot of hurt feelings. And it's important to really tend those hurt feelings, to gather the wisdom, and to move forward from it. Um, Looking at what is this? The absence of conflict does not actually mean peace, right? It's going to take the wisdom of the heart. The Knight of Cups is about opening to the fullness of emotions where wisdom sits with the heart, how one can really use that as a filter when looking at conflict to see where things might have come differently, where things may have been situated to begin with, what you can do differently in the future, what you can do to actually bring peace to the situation instead of just walking away from a fight. And so that's our journey this week, is looking at resolving. And what a perfect time to do that, heading into the equinox, heading into the time of balance. It's about bringing resolution and bringing peace to past conflict. And that's what I have for this week. We'll see you again
Thanks for
on the
joining us.
equinox.
I loved it. Oh, that's right. I loved your comments. Our love goes out to you and to all the ships at sea. All we are saying is give revolution a chance. It doesn't have the same beat to it, I guess.
It doesn't. Cheers.
Bye.